В западных академиях и училищах натаскивали офицерский состав националистических батальонов, поставляли оружие. И хочу особо подчеркнуть, что еще до начала специальной военной операции переговоры Киева с Западом о поставках на Украину и систем ПВО, и боевых самолетов, и другой тяжелой техники. Террористические действия на Донбассе. В западных академиях и училищах натаскивали офицерский состав националистических батальонов, поставляли оружие. И хочу особо подчеркнуть, что еще до начала специальной военной операции биолаборатории в ходе маневров осваивали театр будущих военных действий, властный режим, подпощенную ими Украину к большой войне. И сегодня признаются об этом, они же признаются об этом публично, открыто, не стесняясь. Они словно гордятся, спиваются своим вероломством, называя и Минские соглашения, и нормандский формат дипломатическим спектаклем, блефом. Получается, что все то время, когда пылал Донбасс, когда лилась кровь, когда Россия искренне, я хочу это подчеркнуть, именно искренне стремилась к мирному решению, они играли жизни людей, играли, по сути, как говорят в известных кругах, крапленными картами. Этот отвратительный метод обмана уже не раз был опробован и решен. Также бессовестно, двулично они вели себя в Ирак, Ливию, Сирию. От этого позора никогда им не отмыться. Понятие чести, доверия, порядочности не для них. За долгие века колониализма, диктата, гегемонии они привыкли, что им все позволено. Привыкли воевать на мир. Что также не погодут, не их ведь в басне и обман, мира о приверженности западные символ тотальной беспринципной лжи. Мы твердо отстаиваем не только свои интересы, но и нашу позицию о том, что в современном мире не должно быть деления на так называемые цивилизованные страны и все остальные. Что необходимо честное партнерство, в принципе отрицающее любую исключительность, тем более агрессивную. Мы были открыты, искренне готовы к конструктивному диалогу с Западом. Говорили, настаивали на том, что и Европа, и весь мир нуждаются в неделимой, равной для всех государств системе безопасности. И много лет предлагали нашим партнерам вместе обсудить эту идею, работать над ее реализацией. Но в ответ получали невнятную, либо лицемерную реакцию. Это что касается слов. Но были и конкретные действия. Это расширение НАТО к нашим границам, создание новых позиционных районов противоракетной обороны в Европе и Азии. Зонтиком решили прикрыться от нас. Это развертывание военных контингентов, причем не только у границ России. Я хочу подчеркнуть, да, собственно говоря, это хорошо всем известно, ни у одной страны в мире нет такого числа военных баз за рубежом, как у Соединенных Штатов Америки. Их сотни, я хочу это подчеркнуть, сотни баз по всему миру. Достаточно только взглянуть на карту. Весь мир был свидетелем того, как они выходили из фундаментальных соглашений в сфере вооружений, включая договор о ракетах средней и меньшей дальности. В одностороннем порядке разрывали основополагающие соглашения, поддерживающие мир на планете. Но зачем-то они это ведь делали. Ничего просто так не делают они, как известно. И, наконец, в декабре 2021 года мы официально направили в США и НАТО проекты договоров о гарантиях безопасности. Но по всем ключевым, принципиальным для нас позициям получили, по сути дела, прямой отказ. Тогда окончательно стало понятно, что отмашка на реализацию агрессивного плана дана. И причем, поступающая информация не оставляла сомнений, что к февралю 2022 года все было готово для очередной кровавой карательной акции на Донбассе, против которого, напомню, киевский режим еще в 2014 году бросил и артиллерию, и танки, и самолеты. Мы все хорошо помним картинки, когда с воздуха наносили удары по Донецку. Наносили авиаудары не только по нему, но и по другим городам. В 2015 году они вновь предприняли попытку прямой атаки на Донбасс, при этом продолжая блокаду, обстрелы, террор в отношении мирных граждан. Все это, напомню, полностью противоречило принятым Советом Безопасности ООН соответствующим документам, резолюциям. Полностью.
And they pursued the blockade, and this was against all the resolutions of the Security Council, and it was still done. It's them who launched the war in 2014 and 15, and we were led to use force to stop that war they were leading.
Те, кто планировали новую атаку на Донецк, на Донбасс,
those who thought of a new attack on Lugansk or Luva or Donetsk will remember Crimea and Sebastopol and the objectives which were very openly laid down by Kyiv. We know full well what we are doing. We are defending the life of people, the life of our men, and the Western world has already spent more than $50 billion to support Ukraine and Kyiv, and in 2021 only 61 billion were spent to support the poorest countries in the world. So 150 against 60. It's obvious the countries receiving the aid needed to submit to the will of those powers, and the money that flows for war, there's no end to it. There are also other areas in the world where they are creating unrest. There have been attacks against Russia in the meetings of Munich, and the attacks were just probably to cover up for all their different attacks in the world. There were whole regions that were thrown into chaos. Even American experts say that the follow-up of war, in the aftermath of war, is that were launched in have led to 900,000 people dying and 31 million people being refugees around the world. And that is such a state of things that people had to forget about it, but nobody will forget. So these tragedies
триллионы долларов. Возможность и дальше обкрадывать всех, прикрываясь словами о демократии и свободах.
Not something that can be put aside. There are millions of dollars which are spent to set up systems which are supposed to be democratic in the world, and in fact they're just other authoritarian systems. We have to they have to give, to paint the enemy black so that their own corruption scandals can be covered up and forgotten, so that their internal economic problems are put aside. At the beginning of the 20th century, the Western world had plans and actions which opened the path to Nazism, and it is now a pattern that is happening again. Destruction of Russia by taking away from it Ukraine is the dream of Austria, Hungary, of the empire of Germany, and it led to the putsch of 2014, which was anti-constitutional. It's like if nothing had happened. Things don't change. There is Russophobia, which is at the bottom of everything that happened, and we are ashamed to hear that the special Ukrainian units have called themselves Edelweiss, which is the same name as the German forces who were invaders, and it's quite symbolic. And on the Ukrainian tanks, the neo-Nazi emblems are quite visible. And I'm quite surprised that in the Western world nobody's really paid attention to this. Well, it just shows that they do not care, because what they care for is to fight Russia. It's important for them to have an opportunity to fight Russia. And whatever happens, whether it's terrorists somewhere or anyone in the world who's against Russia, they'll be happy to go along. There's something they want to retaliate for. They want to create conflict situations at our borders. It's the same pattern all along in the whole 20th century. It's to turn any form of action against Russia. We are not waging war with the Ukrainians. We know that they are in a hostage situation. They've been politically and militarily occupied by the Westerners, and the Ukrainian industry and natural riches were plundered, and it's led to social degradation. And it's really not difficult to see why military actions have to be launched. It was all prepared. The idea was to turn them into war victims, and the responsibility of the Western elites, military elites, of a lot of foreigners to the Ukrainian regime. They are not trying to support the interest of the Ukrainian people. They are just using this as a butthead against us. They want to take it further. They have launched new offensives, and the more the long-range weapons of the Westerners will be delivered to Ukraine, the more we must push back this threat on our borders. The Western elites don't even hide their objectives. They want a strategic defeat of Russia. What does that mean? It means to wipe out Russia once and for all, for this local conflict to be aligned with the worldwide confrontation. And this is why we have to react. And we have reacted as we should, because it's the existence defense of our country that is threatened. You have to realize that to bring Russia down militarily is impossible. That is why they attack us on the field of the press or the media. They try and influence young people. They pervert historical facts to change history and show us under a different light. What are they doing with their people? They're talking about destruction. Themselves are good at destruction of their social values. They are pedophiliacs and other criminals who practice. There are homosexual marriages which are perfectly allowed over there. And of course, when I'm not trying to suggest we should interfere in people's private lives, but just look at what it says in the scriptures in all religions of the world. Family is the alliance between a man and a woman, and not between same-sex people. Even those sacred texts are shown in a bad light or are thrown into doubt. Apparently, the American churches want to create the image of a God that doesn't have a gender. They don't know what they're doing. Millions of people in the Western world are about to fall to the hands of a moral catastrophe. They are on the verge of dementia. And we need to defend our children against this moral degradation, this loss of values. Obviously, the Western world is going to try and shake our society. They are going to pan in on the traitors who themselves have turned against their own fatherland, and they are ready to pay them to do that. Some have chosen to the path of treason, and we shall never do as the regime of Kiev and give way to Western ideas and give in to Western powers. We're not going to either try and persecute those who have sidestepped. It's them who have their conscience that is probably against them. But I can give you lots of examples of citizens who are capable of putting that sort of behavior at its right level. In the multinational context, fortunately, there are many people who understand our action, and we have the support in the real patriotic movement that is happening. It's a historical moment for the Russian people who is expressing this will to take its destiny into its own hands. And friends, I would like to thank you all, to thank the Russian people for this courage, this resolution. I would like to thank our heroes of our army, of our navy, of the Russian Guard.
которые сражаются в рядах его армии.
I would like to thank the volunteers,
Хочу принести свои извинения.
those who are participating in the Basque group, and I can't name everybody.
Длинный список героических.
Sorry, when I was preparing my speech, I thought of so many. I had such a long list of all those who are fighting
Просто боялся.
for the cause. I can't name them all.
Низкий поклон родителям, женам.
So those who weren't mentioned, I apologize for them. I thank the families, the wives, the mothers
Инструкторам,
of soldiers.
спасают раненых.
Also,
И водителям,
I would like to salute the doctors, the nurses, the railway staff,
инженерам обороны,
the civil engineers
круглосуточно, в несколько смен.
who are rebuilding the infrastructure, those who work in the armament industry 24 hours a day,
Я благодарю
those who are farmers, and
Я благодарю учителей,
everyone involved in the health and security of our country, and also the teachers who are
фронтовых услуг,
working with the young generation,
которые приезжают
the workers in hard conditions near the front, the actors of culture who
и мирным жителям.
come and present shows in hospitals, journalists,
Рассказать всему миру
war correspondents
российских традиционных религий,
who tell the world the truth,
слово поддерживает и в
and
государственных служащих,
also priests and heads of various religions who help the fighters, entrepreneurs who also do their professional duty, civic, human duty.
особые слова жителям Донецкой и Луганской народов.
I'd like also to thank more specially the inhabitants of the Donetsk, Lugansk, and Kherson regions, because you yourselves,
И террор неонацистов.
you took a referendum
Совсем рядом шли,
for your future.
но
It
не было
was not easy.
быть с Россией,
You were close to the combats,
родиной.
but nothing is stronger than a resolution as expressed in that way
Мы уже
to be in your country, Russia. We've started and we shall go on.
Хочу подчеркнуть, что эта реакция зала в адрес жителей Донецкой.
I would like to underline that this reaction of the audience is a sign for the inhabitants of the Donbass, and it's a homage.
Программу социально-экономического восстановления.
We are going to increase
Речь в том числе о том, чтобы
a campaign for these new topics of the federation. We need to regenerate the job offer and industries. We'll have to rebuild roads, such as in Crimea, where we now have much better connections. We're going to continue to
Донецкой и Луганской народных республик, Запорожье.
give all our support to
Настоящие братья.
the region of Donetsk, Lugansk, and Kherson and
А
Zaporozhye.
значит, стали
We are now
и
reunited. We have become stronger together, and this land, which is ours, is going to become a peaceful and prosperous land once again. For that,
за это, за своих предков, за
For that
будущее
purpose,
детей,
for our ancestors, for the future generations,
сегодня сражаются бойцы,
for re-establishing justice,
дорогие друзья.
our heroes and our soldiers are still fighting. And I would like to ask you to
Стариков, женщин, детей,
pay
которые
homage
погибли под обстрелами
to
от рук неонацистов.
those who have given their lives, in particular in the civil population. The children of the people who gave their lives
Девушки,
for
которые до Великой Отечественной войны боролись с
cause.
отстаивали
It's like in the big patriotic war when
и сегодня
we fought Nazism.
наш долг
There is a spirit of sacrifice
близких, любимых,
and a high spiritual level.
дать им образование,
We need to support those who've
участников
lost
военной операции
their dear ones.
в зоне постоянного внимания.
There's a generation of
На их нужды
fighters
сразу, без волокиты.
who gave their lives, who need to be supported, to whom we should pay tribute. We need to create a fund, a national state fund to give personal help to all the members of the families of victims of the special military operation. It will be a help which can be medical or psychological or social or help for holidays or sports or training, vocational training. This fund will allow support to be given for those who are disabled, for their lives to be improved. So all this needs to be set up, and this new fund will operate as simply as possible with a single window to support each of the families of the victims.
Должен быть закреплен свой персональный социальный работник.
Of those who gave their lives fighting. Each of those families needs to obtain the help they are owed.
В этом году структуры фонда должны быть развернуты во всех регионах Российской Федерации.
The setup of this fund will be deployed in all the regions of the Federation of Russia. Already there is some help for the former combatants of the big war, and this new fund will take care of the victims of the special operations and will be done with the help of the regions and the municipalities, who will have to list the former combatants who are in their district, so that everyone gets the help they need. We also need to go to the front line to carry some help of that type.
О денежном довольстве и страховых выплатах в связи с ранением, о медицинской помощи.
The soldiers who are either volunteers or part of the heavy going to provide everything each mobilized person needs, each military part of the special operations, to provide for everything so that they can have some rest time of at least 2 weeks every 6 months. Every soldier should be able to come back for 2 weeks every 6 months. That is fair. Dear colleagues, we have a plan for this.
Работа по его выполнению идет. Необходимые коррективы вносят.
We also have a plan for rebuilding the armed forces from 21 to 25. This is a plan in order to
Должен быть, безусловно, положен реальный боевой
strengthen our forces of the army and marine and navy, and we have to
абсолютно бесценен. Сейчас уровень
take stock of the experience of the special operation. It's very important to re-equip our forces and nuclear forces.
опыта, который мы получили,
We
такой же высокий, качественный
have
компонент
to reach a level of preparation of
офицеры и сержанты.
at least 90% in all the areas of the military force. The officers we have demonstrated their great ability to carry out their duties, and they
для вооруженных сил. И, безусловно, они должны быть востребованы граждан.
however, they need to get further training. This is quite necessary in the military area as well as in civilian forces, in all the decision bodies. Those men need to understand that their
Самые передовые
country
технологии обеспечат повышение.
is in a position to
Такие разработки, образцы вооружений
use the best they can give, and we have the technical means, we have high quality forces, very much superior to their counterparts in other countries, but we need to step up the production of our weapons. And we need to do this based on our scientific and technical means. We will have more procurement by the army. Our industry armament uses young talent from people who, in line with our tradition, will do everything they can towards the victory. We're going to reinforce the workers' collectives. We're going to increase the salaries so that the armament industry can provide housing to its staff at prices which the government will subsidize. We had this discussion. This program needs to be developed, and we're working on it in full detail so that the subsidized housing is developed in the cities where the armament industry is based, and also where research and development are carried out. It's not exactly a military action. It's not what the Western world thinks. They launched economic attacks against us, but they haven't achieved anything. The sanctions actually punish those who have declared them. In those countries, they are having to close their industries, and they say all the time it's because of the Russians. But what means were used in this aggression? They tried to cut the links with the Russian enterprise. They use misinformation to prevent our companies from selling to them. There's been actually a theft of our reserves in international currencies, and they said themselves, we need them to suffer, but in fact their own citizens are suffering. They want to make us suffer, make our citizens suffer. They want to destabilize us, but they got it wrong. In fact, we are so resilient. Our economy is much more resilient than they thought, thanks to our government, the parliament, the Bank of Russia, our enterprise, our workers. Thanks to all that, we were able to stay firm, to keep up our levels of employment and not let shortages occur. We took some measures. We were able to support our economy and maintain our economic activity. And I'm telling you, it's in millions, billions that they tried to sap us, and we still have a solid basis for our economy. In 2022, we had a drop of the GDP, and I want to talk about this. It's something that was released yesterday, but that is that we had been told that our economy would drop by 25%. But in 2022, we had a drop of 2.1% of our GDP compared to last year at the same time. So when they predicted our economy would drop through the bottom, not at all, because we changed our system. We turned to reliable partners, and in fact there are a lot of them in the world. Compared to December 21, we have in fact reserves that have increased, and half of our currency reserves has been put aside, and we've created international financial regulations which make us independent from the dollar and other strong currencies. So those are in fact losing their universal characteristic, and it's not our fault, it's theirs. Themselves. They did it to themselves. And you know the expression, butter or guns. Of course, the defense of a country is the most important. We mustn't repeat the errors of the past and let our war economy sag, and we need to have the conditions for a safe development of our economy, and we're still continuing along those terms and that logic.
Так, многие базовые, подчеркну, именно гражданские отрасли отечественной экономики за прошлый год не только не сократили, а значительно нарастили производство.
Industrial sectors were not only didn't lose, but they have extended and strengthened their.
And we've just been listening to the Russian President Vladimir Putin there, giving that long-delayed State of the Nation address to both houses of Parliament in Moscow. This, of course, coming just a few days before the one-year anniversary of Russia's invasion of Ukraine.
Right, so that was the Russian President Vladimir Putin addressing the Russian Parliament, and this is, of course, in the build-up to the first-year anniversary, so to speak, of the invasion of Ukraine by Russia. And Vladimir Putin talking about the progress that the Russian side has made, speaking about the good health, that's his claim, of the Russian economy despite the war, and also the fact that the West led by the United States of America, has been seeking to encircle Russia using the NATO as an instrument to do so. He's also spoken out against what he describes as a conflict between Western values as well as Russian values, and the fact that the West has been trying to impose its value system on Russia and its neighborhood. He's also praised what he describes as the achievements on the part of the Russian armed forces on the ground. He also, in fact, praised the efforts on the part of the troops in the contested regions of Donetsk as well as Luhansk, and also the area of Kherson. He's also appraised the Russian parliament of the progress that the Russians have made since the inception of the war, and claimed that these efforts will continue despite the attempt on the part of the West to browbeat Russia.
We'll have increased export by 50 to 60 million tons. 15 years ago, this sounded impossible. It was a dream. It was an impossible plan. If you remember, and some of you remember, not long ago, the 60 million tons was collected. And now 55 to 60 million we are just exporting. I am certain that we have everything to, we managed to lower unemployment, even with all the hardships that we are facing. Our market situation is more comfortable than it was previously. 4.7% unemployment before the pandemic. Now it's 3.7%. 3.7%. This is the historical minimum. I repeat, the economy of Russia was able to withstand all this. Yes, many of these risks, it was impossible to predict this earlier. We had to react on the go, on the level of the government and also in business. Decisions were made in a maximum operational way. Small and medium businesses, we cannot forget about them. We can't have over governance administration. The economical drop was only last year in the second quarter. In the third and the fourth quarter, we saw growth. Specialists say that our economy has our internal market we are opening the massive potential of Russia. In this year, we predict there will be a very solid rise in exports. I think our country will start making the most sought-after products, and these it is possible with the when Western countries are leaving. We understand we must financial logistics. We often talk a lot about the changes in the economy in the last year, but now these changes are life-changing, and in this situation, they are positive. This is a sovereign. We're a sovereign country. I want to underscore this. Our strategic aim is to take our economy to a new level. Everything now is changing, and everything is changing very quickly. At this time, this is a time And depending on how we realize this, this depends on our future. We must remove all the formal bureaucratic inter-agency blocks. Family business and startups, opening kilometers of new roads and new factories, new kindergartens and new schools. This is a victory. New educational and technological openings. This is a victory. This is what's important. In which areas do we need to concentrate on our partnerships in the regions, in the regional businesses? We must increase the perspective for economical and logistic corridors. We have already made decisions by the government for a Moscow-Kazan highway between Irkutsk and Vladivostok with access to Kazakhstan, Mongolia, and China. We need to widen our economical connections with Asia. Already in this country, in this year, between the Volga-Caspian Sea, we are opening a new connections with countries like Iran, Pakistan, and the Middle East.
В наших планах ускоренная модернизация восточного направления железных дорог, Транссиба и БАМа, наращивание возможностей Северного морского пути. Это не только дополнительные грузопотоки, но и основа для решения общенациональных задач по развитию Сибири, Арктики и Дальнего Востока. Получит мощный импульс инфраструктура регионов, развитие инфраструктуры, связь, телекоммуникации, дорожную сеть. Уже в следующем 2024 году не менее 85% дорог в крупнейших агломерациях страны, а также более половины дорог регионального и межмуниципального значения будут приведены в нормативное состояние. Продолжим и программу бесплатной газификации. Уже принято решение распространить ее на социальные объекты, детские сады и школы, поликлиники, больницы, фельдшерско-акушерские пункты. А для граждан такая программа теперь будет действовать на постоянной основе. Они всегда смогут обратиться за подключением. Смогут обратиться за подключением своего дома к сетям газоснабжения. С этого года начинается большая программа по строительству и ремонту систем ЖКХ. В течение 10 лет планируется инвестировать в эту сферу не менее 4,5 триллионов рублей. Мы знаем, насколько важно для граждан, насколько запущена эта сфера. Надо работать и будем это делать. Важно, чтобы программа сразу получила мощный старт, поэтому прошу правительство обеспечить ее стабильное финансирование. Второе. Нам предстоит существенно расширить технологические возможности российской экономики, обеспечить рост мощностей отечественной индустрии. Запущен инструмент промышленной ипотеки. Причем теперь льготный кредит можно будет взять не только на покупку производственных площадей, но и на их строительство или модернизацию.
The amount of this credit will be around 500 million rubles. We need 5% in the next. We have a very good program, and we need to expand it. From this year, we will have a new program of industry clusters. Long-term orders and subsidies. These measures will from 2030, we'll pump 1 trillion rubles into these measures. It could even go up to 2 trillion. I want to bring your attention, this is not just a prognosis, but these are concrete orientees. I asked the government to provide a shoulder for business and for tax breaks. A creative approach to tax breaks is needed. This is how we start from this year. Russian companies will have a tax break, and they'll have to especially in the IT area and the areas of artificial intelligence. For every ruble that they invest into these types of products, which I've just talked about, for Russian technology, thirdly, a very important question. It's a very good decision, which will liven up our economy. For economic growth, we need new sources of investment. We do not have to borrow money from overseas. We won't have to have dialogue about how much and what. Our Russian banks must work stably. In the last year, there was growth in the banking sector. They grew by 14%. This is more than in 2021. In 2021, the growth was 11.7%, and now it is 14%. The banking system is working with a profit, but it's not a massive profit, but if it's a good profit. This is proof that the financial sector is stable. Inflation in Russia is at 4%. I remind you that some countries in the European Union have 17%, 12%, or even 20% inflation. We have 4, maybe 5%. Looking at dynamics of these dynamics and other macroeconomical dynamics, this means that credit for these sectors will be available. Long-term deposits for the people. I asked the government to expedite law projects from April of this year. It's important to create extra programs to make money and invest at home within the country. There should be another mechanism, insurance for bank deposits. The money must be insured by the government, and returns must be guaranteed. To increase the limit to 2,800,000. We need to create support for the inner financial markets, for the buyers of such. This is freedom of entrepreneurship. We are showing that Russia is able to quickly adapt and the economy is able to grow. There will be support made available for this. I think we need to look over the criminal code in relation to economic crimes. We can't we must decriminalize many aspects of these crimes. Business circles and law enforcement and the government should be in contact with the parliament to bring in extra measures. This is the basic principle. And in connection with this, dear colleagues, respected colleagues, I'd like to just make a small side remark, philosophical remark. We remember with which problems and disbalance the later economy of the Soviet Union had to deal with. The chaos of the 1990s, the country started to create an economy based on privatization, and many of the Western advisors were here in Russia. It was enough for us just to copy their models. I remember the Europeans would argue with the Americans how we should now, the policies at the time were orientated on the West, and especially raw materials. The new forming Russian business and the main thing they wanted to do was to make profits. It was the selling of oil and gas, and no one thought that this was possible. Therefore, other more difficult areas of the economy, we wanted to break this negative trend. We needed years with massive government investment, and we have made serious grounds here, serious changes. You must understand under what situation we were in. Technology in the West and more cheaper financial sources. And unfortunately, instead of making decisions to buy equipment and technology to create new employment positions here in Russia, here they were being spent on foreign investment and buying yachts And in the first instance, there was a large amount of capital flight. There, where there was wealth, their wealth was overseas and their kids were overseas. And it was hard to keep track of these situations for the government because we were living in the paradigm of a free market. The stereotype of the West being a safe haven for funds, for finances, turned out not to be true, turned out to be false. And they just stole your money in the West. That money, even that money that you honestly earned, I hereby appeal to the representatives of the business. You'll be running around. I told you this, and this would happen, that you'll be running around the West trying to protect your money. I warned you, and this happened. And you know, I'll add a very, very important point, which is very simple but important. Nobody out of the simple citizens of the country did not have any sympathy for those who lost their money in the West. No one had sympathy who lost their mansions and their yachts overseas. People remember the privatization of the 90s, where the industries of the country were going for very cheap. In all the years after the collapse of the Soviet Union, they wanted to destroy Russia as a country which inherited the largest part of the Soviet Union. They provocated regional conflicts. They ignored our interests. And large Russian businesses answer for the question. In many regions, they decide the economic situation, and the leaders and the owners of such businesses turned out to be not independent. This is a big danger for us, danger for our country. This kind of situation is not tolerable. It will not be tolerable. We want to live out the rest of the country in a mansion, in a nice Western capital. This is the right of any person. We're not against this, but we must understand that for the West, these people were and will be people of the second sort.